My guest today is Agent Spurgers, and a former FBI agent who is going to tell us an interesting story that he wrote a book about called Murder at Midnight. Welcome, Jerry.
Welcome, Jim. Good morning, Jim. Thank you.
So let's get a little bio first. You, again, are now retired FBI, but why don't you just give my audience a little bit background of sort of how you started in law enforcement and sort of then plopped into FBI as a sort of final resting place.
Sure. And it's actually not my final. I'm still in it in just a different capacity now. I graduated college with a criminal justice degree and immediately went to the Air Force. This was in 1988 with a military policeman, guarded nuclear weapons for the last, couple of years of the Cold War. Spent almost 9 years in the Air Force. And in 1997, joined the FBI. It was one of those timing issues. I was doing well in the Air Force and enjoyed the Air Force, but I really wasn't using my degree a lot, and I wanted to see if I could be an investigator. FBI was hiring. I had 2 young sons at home and of course, a wife, and looked like a little bit better family background than what the military would be.
And you landed in your most of your stuff, though I did read your bio at the end of the book, that you were used in other places, but basically your home base was Arkansas. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It was one of those timing issues. We had a director that was a very family-oriented guy, and wanted to get you where you wanted to live. And my family, my wife's family was from this area. I was one of the very fortunate guys. I spent 24 years in the same office. I actually spent the 24 years in the same squad, violent crime squad, where I started off as an agent, spent 7 years as a supervisor, and then went back to being a street agent rather than have to transfer to DC. And also had the opportunity to work crime scenes on our evidence response team for just about my entire career.
Now, one of the things that I'm fascinated about this book, and one of the things I point out to my listeners whenever I do an interview that's based on a book or that a book is part of the story, is that you have to get the book, because we are not going to be able to cover the whole thing, not in the detail that the book does. The book is very compelling, I will say that. It's corny, but it's a page turner. And it is rich in details of the people, of the place, of the thing. And we can't really cover that. You obviously took a lot of time to read it, and editors looked at it and fixed a little here and fixed a little there and made it the wonderful book that it is. So, of course, it's out there in Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your local library, possibly a local bookstore. If you can go to a brick and mortar store, that's always the best. So again, it's a fantastic book. One of the things that, again, I've done like almost 300 of these things. And the thing that sort of made this one different for me is because, again, it's usually a murder and, somebody kills someone, maybe a serial killer, and there's family involved. It's very sad. The participants in this, and you pointed out several times, it's drug driven. The story is illegal drug driven. And most of the participants, innocent or not, are in the drug culture. And it reads like something out of, Law and Order or SVU or something, where you're down dark alleys and you're dealing with people whose lives are pretty screwed up because of drugs. And if it weren't saved for the drugs, they might not be in such trouble. The other couple of things that we will cover is my understanding, which has only come recently, that the FBI, we think the FBI is involved in everything, but they're not. And we'll talk about how the restrictions on the FBI as far as investigations, and how you had not tiptoe, but you were on as advisory, the FBI itself, in this case, because it is not, at that point, there were no federal laws directly being investigated, the violation thereof. Correct me anytime I'm wrong about this, but I know that was interesting too. The other thing that we'll get into it too is the CI. We're all familiar with confidential informants and all that, and it's cool. But I think what really struck me about this one is and I think even in the movies and that, that the informant is not clean. They're an informant because they were able to be hooked because of either trying to get out of trouble, maybe make a couple of bucks, but they are not, I probably would never be a CI. No one would do that because I don't know any criminals. And so that was the really interesting part that the poor person who ends up being the murder victim was not only a CI, but obviously at the same time, and we'll talk about that, continued to use drugs. So we'll talk about how they're able to do that and still be a credible witness, at a trial. But I found that incredibly fascinating. And so let's go. Now that I've done all that, I'll cut a lot of this out with just a quick question to you. But I just wanted to know that that's one of the things that really drew me into the book. And of course, you having and any policeman having to try to protect their CI, looking out for them. It's a mutual relationship, if you will, that they're giving something to you, and so you've got to keep them. You or any policeman, any authority has to keep them safe. So let's go back to the date. We're going to talk the date that this started as a missing persons case in Malvern. You'll probably give us a little color of Malvern as well, Arkansas. And it happened on October 1st, 2016, involved a young lady named Susan Cooper. So give us a little background on the beginning of the case and
Sure.
what happened to Susan.
Sure. You mentioned Malvern. Malvern is a small town. I don't remember the population, probably 10 or 15,000 people. I think it's in the book. But Malvern is located about an hour south of Little Rock on Interstate 30. Like a lot of our small communities, it's going through economic tough times, and drugs are very prevalent among and there's no racial boundary or gender boundary. I mean, lots of people, in that community use drugs, as in a lot of communities. Susan Cooper was a lady that was middle-aged, and she had been caught up in that lifestyle. As we kind of try to unpack in the book, Susan was I never met her, but I believe a decent person that, and that she made efforts and she tried, but unfortunately the call of the drugs kept calling her back. And that's part of the behavior that made her a viable target to be a criminal informant, because she knew the culture and she was, able to operate in it. She actually disappeared on September the 26th of 2016. But as you mentioned, the FBI doesn't really get involved until October 1st, October 2nd. Part of that, as being an adult, or a few days before her family realized that she was missing. Once family started talking and realized it was missing, police reports were found. The sheriff's office and the police department, small community, but both of them responded immediately and did all the appropriate actions. Very quickly, they were hearing stories, obviously, that we kind of unpacked during the book, about what might have happened to her. But the bottom line was that they didn't know. They couldn't find her. As things continued to go, they developed a theory. They got some information, couldn't completely vet it out and verify it. And then pretty early on, they started reaching out to the FBI for help. As you and I discussed, and one of the things that's been interesting, I was an agent for 24 years, lived in the same area, went to the same church. I have gone to the same church since 1997. And it's been surprising how many of my friends have read the book and said, we had no idea. We thought you guys could just go do anything. And there has to be some type of federal jurisdiction. Early on in this case, it wasn't obvious what that jurisdiction might be. And so the FBI could do some things. I mentioned I did crime scene work. We often help with crime scenes. I'm not a computer analyst, but we have fantastic computer analysts. We can offer those sorts of things. But within a few days, information came to us from the United States Attorney's Office in Little Rock that she was in fact a CI buying drugs on cases that were going to be taken to federal prosecution, which made her a federal witness. And that gave us the authority to participate. And that was always kind of my, I don't mean to sound cold, but that was always my kind of favorite cases to work. I enjoyed working homicide investigations. And we did get to work a lot of them in the FBI because a lot of them don't have that federal jurisdiction. And I had a supervisor this was late in my career. I was, in fact, I think 19 years in when this case started. And my supervisor said, go get it. And it was just, like releasing a dog off a chain, and I was very fortunate. I got to work with some DEA guys that I knew along the way. I got to know some of the Malvern guys and work closely with them. And then one of the County Sheriff's deputies, that we had actually known each other, but we became close friends. This case worked it, from almost, he didn't get involved until January, but from January until the case ends, we were able to work it together.
You do in the beginning of the book, which is, I appreciate, and I think it really does help. You do take some time to talk about the characters, because it's easy just the facts, man. But if we don't understand, especially, I'm a white bread guy, upper middle class. So, drugs, that's your own problem. I mean, that I fight that, because I know how insidious drugs can be. I knock on wood, I have no one in my family that's ever been addicted. But I'm not blind that it's a horrible, horrible scourge. And one of the things that did surprise me, because again, I'm used to the guy down, doing, with a needle in his arm, in a back alley. People like Susan, they had a family. They, even the perps had wives and kids, and they were trying in and amongst the drugs. They weren't big. They weren't a cartel. We're not talking about a cartel. We're talking about individual people whose lives are screwed up and are working with it. Does that mean they can kill or hurt other people in their, endeavors? No. But your picture, your painting of Susan and the other, like I said, the other people, another name, we'll talk about her friend, Donna Mason, who plays a big part in the story, and how it all goes to hell, if you will. So as you're sort of working with the police, what was the balance like? In other words, did you go out, now that you had an excess, were you able to go out and interview people, or were you there like piecing through evidence when it was brought to you?
No, you're right. The first time was probably more accurate. I was involved from day one, and my file, when I looked at it after I retired, when I was preparing for court and such, we interviewed 200 people. So there's a lot of boots on the ground. But it was very fortunate. Arkansas is, as you probably surmise, is a pretty rural state, and a lot of these sheriff's offices, in Hot Spring County being one, they only had one, sometimes two investigators, and so there's not the manpower that you needed. And so a lot of these cases, and one of the reasons I enjoyed law enforcement so much in Arkansas was that we just took a team approach to most things, and this is one of those. We had, like I said, we had the sheriff's office, the police department, me. Early on, the DEA, towards the latter part of the case, the DEA had to shift focus and wasn't as involved as they would have liked to have been. There were also 3 or 4 other police departments and sheriff's offices around that we could reach out to. And it's about an hour drive from our field office in Little Rock to Malvern, and probably 3 days a week. I drove down and would spend the day, and we would work, and many hours, like any other investigator, many hours on the phone, after hours and that sort of thing. But no, it was, and that's, I guess, is one of the reasons why I felt so compelled to write this story, because some of the cases were, like you mentioned earlier, sometimes I was more of an advisor, or a lot of the cases I worked on, murder investigations, I was there with the crime scene. And so we processed the crime scene, and then, my part was over. But this part, I had the opportunity to be involved from start to finish. And when I started telling friends about the story, like, you got to write that down. This is a story that people need to hear. So I took their advice, and I hope that's right.
Oh, it's right. But let's, again, I read the book a couple of days ago, and then I reviewed it. So I may be asking questions that are very obvious, but when was it, how long into it before it really sounded like to you and the other investigators that this was not missing person, it was dead, it was someone murdered?
From the start, immediately. And I don't have the date in front of me. That she was reported missing on October the 2nd. Seems like it was about a week before I went down there. But I remember when I got the initial presentation, I told them, yeah, you guys have solved the case. We just have to prove it. And so from the start, it was, And we had, and I talk about this in the book, we did explore other options. So we didn't just, put blinders on and focus on the two suspects in this case. But the circumstantial evidence was very strong from the start, and the motive was strong. I mean, it added up. And so those guys had done great work. But again, it was knowing and improving are sometimes two different things in the eyes of the law.
And also, like I said, that it becomes over time with interviews and whatnot that it was a murder, and certain evidence comes forward about blood in a truck and such as that. But again, you do point out is even you then get suspects and go towards a trial. Although it has happened, but conviction without a body is very rare. And so it's always best to find a body. So take us through the suspects. Take us through how they sort of come to the surface, because again, it's a tangled web of people that are just doing the drugs, being informed upon. But then it becomes clear that that they came and they decided there was a reason to kill her.
Sure. So so early on, the local officers learned that the last time Susan was seen, she was seen with a girl named Donna Mason, associate of hers. And that Donna Mason had picked her up one night from another friend's house and was never seen again. Donna Mason had her own issues with drugs. As again, we got, I think, kind of lay out. And it took the officers a day or so to find her. When they found her, she gave a story that, she admitted to picking up Susan, but she had talked about dropping her off a location that family said there's no way it would have happened. I don't want to spoil everything because I obviously want people to read the book, but Susan had a very intense fear of the dark. And the first story that that Donna offered for what would have happened to Susan would involve her going to a dark place that everybody knew that she would never done it willingly. They pressed on Donna, and relatively quickly she told them that a guy named Sam Sherman lived in the area and had been in trouble for drugs with the federal government before. Susan had bought drugs from him, and he had a trial coming up. And as you probably remember, there's almost a whole chapter talking about these trial dates and all, but everything indicated that Sam had a trial. He believed he had a trial coming up within a few days, and that Susan would testify against him. And the belief was that if Susan couldn't testify, he couldn't be convicted. And so, we have to kind of guess a little bit. But Sam had a cousin named Donald Smith, and they were more than cousins. They were friends. They were associates. The information we were hearing was that at least at some point in their lives, they had sold drugs together. So again, more than just cousins. But between the two of them, and only they know who had the idea first, but they decided that Susan had to disappear. And so they concocted this plan with Donna, that Donna would deliver Susan to a remote location and something would happen. Donna claimed that she didn't know that Susan would be killed. And I truly don't know whether she knew that or not. There were some inconsistencies in Donna's stories, but there were also enough commonalities that we were able to support with evidence. And so that's what happened. The night that she picks her up from her friend, she takes her to a remote house. Susan is murdered. Donna leaves. And then it's up to us to find where Susan is. And Smith and Sherman were not about to tell us.
Well, what I do think it's kind of, again, it's a ironic sadness, if you will, that Mr. Sherman was concerned. I mean, again, he got out of prison for other, drugs or whatever, that, who knows what his last, reason to go to prison. But he's out, he's back with his family. And then there's this other possible, he's then in trouble again. And he's trying to, he says, geez, I'm going to have to go back to prison. And he's working towards, with the feds, he's seeing if he can cut a deal or something and not go back. And then again, she is going to be the witness, Susan, only to the drug part of it. And so, am I wrong again? Did I miss something? Doesn't he end up going to prison anyway for
Absolutely.
that or something?
Absolutely. So he was on supervised release. And in the federal system, we don't really do we don't do parole. You do your time, and it's usually 80 to 85% of the time, at least. And then there's usually a period of supervised release. And his was, I think, 2 years. I don't remember what his exact time was. But what that basically means is if anything happens, if he breaks the law again during that time, that they could be sent back to prison on the remainder of that sentence. And that's what happened. But he was also facing charges. Susan had bought drugs from, I believe it was 5 or 6 times. And he was facing charges on those, which he ultimately ended up getting sentenced on those charges also. It had nothing to do with Susan. Well, I would say not necessarily part of Susan's disappearance. It was just the selling the drugs to her.
Now, with another person, because it was, like I said, it was Donna Mason, and it was Mr. Sherman, but then there is another Donald Smith, who was part and parcel, I believe, of he's also charged. So obviously he was part of the actual, either at the place or whatever, an accomplice to the murder. And I forget, what was his beef? I mean, why was he?
It was a brotherhood issue. He was protecting his cousin.
And
Yeah. And again, Donald Smith, when we arrested him, he never told us this. So this is what we've just had to surmise from the circumstances and the evidence. But everything indicates that's exactly what he was doing. He was trying to protect his cousin.
Now, an amazing character. I'm reading this and I'm going, okay, that, I guess maybe you don't get arrested for that. But let me get his name here. Who owned the house? Willie McMillan.
So what Donna tells us and what we think happened is Donna goes and takes Susan to this remote area. It's on a place called Rigsby Ford Road, which is on the outskirts of Malvern. It's a paved road, but it's a dark, kind of sort of out in the middle of nowhere. The only lights, there's a prison nearby. It's the only real thing that lights the area up. The house is dark. She and Susan go to the house and they're waiting. And what Susan believes, and there's some conflicting information here, was she was either getting ready to meet somebody to either buy drugs or sell drugs. We never really could quite establish that. Like I said, Donna had some inconsistencies in her stories, but she took Susan there, not telling Susan who the person she was going to meet. The person was Donald Smith. Had Susan known, she never would have gone to meet Donald Smith. And we talk, again, we speak about it in the book, but Susan had reasons to fear Donald and Sam Sherman months before anything happened, before she disappeared. So according to Donna, they wait there for a while. After a while, Susan's had enough. She goes back to the truck. Donna gets in the driver's seat of the truck that she is driving. And as she's getting in the truck, she hears Susan scream. Don Smith is pulling her out. There's a number of gunshots. Actually, I think initially maybe there's one gunshot. Donna speeds away. And as she's speeding away, she hears what she says, 5 or 6 more gunshots. And then according to her, she's gone. And she's not back at that house. Willie McMillan is actually the person that owns that house. It was his grandparents or his parents' house, and he was restoring it. And he lived in a house trailer with his wife about 1/10 of a mile away. We talked to Willie. To be honest with you, I kind of like Willie. But Willie, from the start, and there's just, I think, some of the most, extreme stories about Willie in the book that, there's a whole deal with this polygraph that I think your readers will enjoy. But Donald Smith goes to Willie's house that night. And it takes us, what I'm getting ready to tell you, it's months before we figure this out. But he goes to the house that night, gets Willie to come back to the Grigsby Ford house, shows the body of Susan, and forces Willie to go back behind the house into a pasture and bury her. And then Willie's kind of out of the picture that night for the most part. But when we talked to Willie, Willie denies any of that. He said our initial conversations were, hey, I know him. He parks his car at my house sometimes. We've done some car work together. We're not buddies. I don't buy dope from him. I had no idea what happened, and I can live in my house, and there could have been gunshots and me just not heard it. I don't know about that, but that's what Willie told us. And it takes almost 2 years for us to get Willie to tell us what happened. And again, I don't know if you want to tell those circumstances or leave those to be read, but there are a lot of things that came together that worked to make Willie come forward. And were it not for Willie, we never would have found Susan.
Now, he was not charged with any, I mean, like, moving a body or interfering with he was or was not charged.
He was not.
And that's the other thing that comes in the trial is kind of interesting. We'll talk a little bit about the trial, of course, is that most of the witnesses are ill repute, if you will. So it's tough for a prosecutor. That wasn't your job, prosecutor, to draw out of them what the jury. Was it a jury trial?
It was, absolutely.
Yeah. So what the jury can accept from bad people. I'm sure the judge or someone, or even in arguments, they pointed out, just because someone is a drug dealer doesn't mean something they witnessed or something they said. And there was a lot we'll talk about that too, amazing backup of phone records, texts, and things that corroborated what the people on the stand were saying. So it wasn't just what they claimed. But as a lot of them talked, I thought, why is this person good? They're a witness, but they're sort of just not being charged with anything. I mean, here you want to bring the two guys that actually did it. You want to bring them, but Mason, I mean, it wouldn't have happened if maybe another time it would have happened, but she was, was she charged or not?
Yeah. Donna was charged in state court.
Got it. In state court. Okay.
Right. Okay. So she was charged, and Mike could have charged her federally, but there's a whole double jeopardy issue, even though it's a different crime. And Willie could have been charged. And I actually was one of the, because I don't have the final, the prosecutors had that final decision, but Willie didn't come forward because he was afraid for his life, which I genuinely believe. And again, he had reason to believe that he's already stood by one dead body. I'm not sure everybody that worked the case agreed with me on that, but that's kind of why that was my way.
You admitted you liked Willie. Willie's a good guy. I mean,
I did like Willie.
He's a character. He's a character and a half. So now, for me, you said 2 years later he came forward with the exact, with the correct story or the true story of what happened. When were charges filed in the timeline?
During that 2 years, there are no charges. I mean, Don has already been charged by state court. Sam Sherman is in jail in prison on his other charges. So he's really not a threat to the community at that point in time. Donald Smith is our big fear because Donald Smith is on the street. And as I talk about in the book, we don't think this was Donald's first involvement in.
Yeah, so it's either one. I had to look it up because, and of course, what comes up first is TV references. But are you talking about the Matlock murders?
Well, so I don't know, but there were some people's names who were brought up as suspects. And of course, they're in my book, but I use aliases for them. Those people were all friends or associates with Donald and Sam. So I don't know if that was involved or not, but there was a very strong allegation that he fired shots at a lady thinking it was her husband or a boyfriend, to the fact his DNA was even found close to the crime scene. But there was a woman that he assaulted in Texas years ago. So I mean, he has a history, or had a history of that, and so we felt there was a legitimate threat to the community. And so we spent, of course, those 2 years. We're trying to find Donna, but we're also trying to find reasons that we can get Donald Smith off the street. You and I were talking. We talked about the no body homicide. We went down the idea of trying to do a no body homicide prosecution. The FBI's behavioral analysis unit has a book that they've put out. We got it and used it. Prosecutors are obviously, and understandably, reluctant to do that. Again, double jeopardy, you only get one chance. And so, even though as an investigator, me and Glenn Pye, my friend from the Hot Spring County Sheriff's Office that I worked with, we wanted the guy off the street, and we felt, we had enough. We were smart enough to know that we were also one of the prosecutors. And, neither one of us are attorneys. And, so we're spending this time trying to get evidence against Donald, sufficient evidence. There's one particular witness that and I probably looked at my notes. I use so many aliases in the book that sometimes I have to go back and make sure.
Really? Oh, you got to do that, huh?
Look, I've got 2 pages of these. So, I talk about a lady named Molly Anderson in the book.
Molly Anderson, I got her down here in my notes.
Molly is a key witness. And Molly, again, out of fear of Donald Smith, Molly took us 2 years to find her. So there were a lot of this sort of things that were going on. But about the 2-year point, we reached the point with the sheriff's office that we believed that we had done all we could to get Donald Smith. And we felt that it was a prosecutable case. And so the sheriff decided, let's arrest him. Well, at the same time that this is going on, but no communication, going between this or the 2 entities, the assistant United States attorney assigned to the case at that time said, let's bring Willie McMillan to the grand jury to get his testimony. If you're not real familiar with that federal grand jury process, at this time, the FBI a lot of times didn't record interviews, old policies that I can't justify, and it's since changed. They record them now. But a lot of times they would bring a witness to the grand jury and have the person testify. You can't take the person's Fifth Amendment rights away, but you bring them in. If they choose to testify, there is a charge that if they lie to the grand jury, that are, it's making false statements, that's a prosecutable kind of case. And so the day that I served Willie the subpoena come to the grand jury is within just 2 or 3 days of us arresting Donald Smith. And I remember, Willie was at work. I walked in and like I said, we'd talked to each other multiple times by then. We knew each other. We were first name basis. And I go in and said, man, okay, the subpoena, you've got to come to the grand jury. And he's visibly shaken. And I said, oh, by the way, you do know Donald Smith got arrested, don't you? And he just shocked. He goes, what? I said, yeah, he's arrested. He goes, I had no idea. I said, yeah, he's in jail. And so he goes, okay, well, I'll be at the grand jury. So the day of grand jury, and again, it's a secret process. There's nobody in the room but the grand jurors, the person testifying, and the United States attorney that's asking questions. I mean, even as the case agent, I couldn't be in there, but I was in the outer room. And a minute before that, the prosecutor sits down with Willie in another room, just kind of preparing for the grand jury. And within a few minutes, he comes out and says, Jerry, you got to come in here. And so I sit down at the table with him, and it's 2 federal prosecutors, it's Willie and it's me. And he looks over and he says, hey, Jerry, that girl you've been looking for. I said, yeah. He goes, I know where she is. And, and I was an older guy at the time, but I still was like a kid at Christmas, like, what? And he goes, yeah. He said, I buried her. And proceeds to tell us, the story of going to the Grisby Ford house, how he went back into the field, how Smith forced him to go back here, where they buried her. We immediately, as soon as I get through with him, we drive to Malvern, find the spot, and it's just as Willie describes. It's late at night, and we put a deputy on the spot all night to guard the spot until our FBI evidence response team could come out the next morning. We work and we recover Susan's body. But all those things, and I kind of, I have really no reason to offer but divine intervention because I don't know, they just came together. If we had not arrested Donald Smith, Willie never would have told us the truth. But there was never this arrest Willie to do, this arrest Donald to do that. Things just kind of came together in great timing. And about this time, Molly Anderson finds out about Donald Smith being in jail. She finally calls me, and I'd made numerous attempts to find her. She finally calls me and says, yeah, let me tell you the story. And she tells us the story of Donald Smith confessing to her of killing. So these 3 kind of huge things all came together, but they weren't coordinated. I'd love to take credit for saying they were.
In the book, which again, it's very sad, you detail how you went out to the dump site. I don't even call them grave sites; they're dump sites. And slowly, again, digging slowly. And at first, it was maybe you weren't sure you're in the right spot, but Willie's going, no, it's there. And you find a sock or you find a barefoot, and it's like, what was, again, a little bit at this time, we're now talking 2 years later that you find the body. How invested, we always have parents or family that, put up posters and all this stuff. By then, was the family still, we think maybe she's out there, she's run away or whatever. What was their feeling about, because again, you do write in the book, I guess, that you would later on or years after you were in contact kept in contact with her sons, or was it someone else's children?
Her sister. Well, she has a sister named Tina, and she had a cousin named Misty, but they're all the same age. They grew up together, and they all considered themselves sisters, even though Misty was a cousin. Misty and I talked frequently, and it wasn't adversarial or anything like that, but she was very committed. Tina was also. I just didn't talk to her quite as much. I think Glenn probably talked to her more than I did. They were very committed. They hoped against hope that she was alive, but they knew the odds of that were slim to none. I mean, they would have heard from her. But no, they were very engaged. But these, and there's a little bit of a song and dance when you're working with the family. You want to keep the family involved, but you have to. I was one. We went on numerous red herrings. We went on numerous places looking for her that we didn't find her. And my theory, and I don't know if I was a victim family member, if I'd feel different. I never told them about it until afterwards because I didn't want to get their hopes up and then dash their hopes. And so this day, we didn't tell Misty or Susan anything until after we had found the body. And even though we couldn't identify her on sight, we were quite confident who she was. And Glenn, once we were done, went and told them, and they actually took them out to the site that night. So they were very engaged. Her sons, Susan's sons, I met and talked to some. I didn't talk to them a lot. And there were some reasons. And part of it being just the fear of the drug culture. I mean, I can't disagree with that. If I'd known my mother was missing and presumably killed by this guy, I'm not sure how much talking I'd want to do about the guy. So I didn't interact with the sons quite as much, but it was nothing negative.
Now, one of the things, again, when Willie sees something and it's not a big deal, we nowadays go running to the police. There was the issue, I guess, help me with the truck, and it had to be cleaned, obviously of the blood, or the Taco Bell sauce. That was an interesting reference. The codes that obviously they used in texting and phone calls. So I'm sorry. So whose truck did they use? And did the owner ever see the blood and just not care, or was it taken care of so that the owner, I think it was somebody's mother, okay, so whose mother?
Sure, let me tell you about it. So the truck that Donna used that night to drive Susan was Donna's mother's truck. Her mother loaned it to her kind of reluctantly. Just again, like I said, Donna's had some issues, but she agreed to loan it to her that night. Susan is in the truck or getting into the truck initially when she's shot, and she bleeds into the truck. Donna stayed a shot, drives off. She actually goes home that night, her mother's house. Doesn't tell her what's happened, but tell her, she's distraught. There's something going on. And her mother says, the whole time she's talking to me, she's texting texting, or I don't think she took any call. I think she just texted. What she's texting was Smith. And Smith tells her, come bring the truck to my house so we can get the taco sauce out. Just a horrible bad reference to the blood. But I think you just some insight into how Don Smith looks at people. But anyway, so they take it to the truck. It's detailed that night. Then they bring a guy out who is a car detailer. He comes back out that morning and goes through it again. And they clean the truck up pretty good. But once Donna tells the story to local law enforcement, they immediately get a search warrant. Arkansas Crime Lab goes through it, and they find a small amount of blood, but there was enough blood to identify it as Susan. So we knew Susan's blood had been in the truck, which kind of helped. Donna, again, had the issues, but that part bolstered her story. Putting Susan's blood in. And that's kind of in this line of work. It's what we were faced with is almost everybody law enforcement deals with has some kind of baggage. And, the prosecutor just has to basically convince a jury, yeah, they had this baggage, but that doesn't mean this part isn't correct. And in this case, they brought in several witnesses that met that category. Yeah, they may have some issues, but they're telling you this. And it all kind of added up.
Now, obviously the defense would, in the trial, then they are cross-examining, the various witnesses. Do they have any, did they have a case that they put on as well? a defense case? What was their theory of the crime, or how were they were trying to say, no, these guys didn't do it?
Well, so they had 2 or 3 issues, and the defense attorney, even though we were opposing, I know this defense attorney, he's a good guy, and I, didn't take any of it personal, but early on, law enforcement searched the house that Susan had been living in. They found a list of names, and there, I don't remember, 20 or 30 names on the list, and it's people that Susan was believed to have bought drugs from. So part of the defense's argument was it could have been any of these guys, and kind of insinuated that we were less than thorough about not checking all of them. And we actually did some of the ones that we did look into, and there's a whole story about one guy in a different state that we tracked down, and he actually, there were a lot of circumstances that made him a likely suspect. But again, most evidence kept pointing back to Donald and Sam. They pointed, one of their strategies when it came to Molly and Willie was that, they were money motivated. They were only telling this story because they were, trying to get money, because employment, get paid sometimes. I'm trying to remember, those are the 2 main, they tried to discredit our witnesses, which again, they had some ammunition in their pouches for that. I mean, there were some issues. But those are the main things, was that we were maybe less than thorough in our investigation, and that our witnesses' motivation was money, and that perhaps they did it. But they didn't. Of course, they're not charged with putting up other suspects. All they had to do was, cast doubt in the jury's mind about their defendants, or their clients, excuse me.
Now, again, it's so convoluted because of the federal versus the state. But so what was the crime that they were actually, Sherman and Smith, what were the crime they were actually convicted of?
So there were 5 counts out there, and I don't have them memorized. But basically, they dealt with drug distribution, and I don't remember the verbiage, but basically, are using a gun in the midst of a crime with drugs, and then murdering a federal witness. And so there are 5 counts, but those were the 3 that they were charged with.
So that was, again, I remember that was the connection, that if she were just a person, then you'd have to go different ways with it.
There'd been no federal charge.
But that is a federal crime to murder a federal witness. So that's, boom, bang, boom. And they did some, again, you have it covered in the book. They did some appealing, like maybe 3 or 4 appeals. I didn't know you could do different. I thought you sort of have to put them all into one appeal, but I guess not. So one of the big ones was that the trial should have been separate, that the 2 of them should have been tried together, but that didn't go anywhere. And there's a couple other things, but long story short, they did not succeed, and they are both in prison is it for life?
Yes. Sherman, if I remember correctly, Sherman got 1 life sentence, and Smith got 2, and those are federal sentences. So they won't get out.
They're not coming. They're not coming out. Well, this was this? I forget. This was like sort of your swan song, or did you have some quite a bit of work after?
Well, so it happened in 2016, and I retired in 2021. So I did work some other cases. This was the biggest part of my workload during that time. I did work a couple other good cases. One was an old cold case on a guy who'd been in the ministry that had molested kids years earlier. So it kind of got overshadowed by this, so I was still working. And then I left in 2021. I was a year from mandatory retirement, and the state of Arkansas was looking for a chief security officer for the House of Representatives. And so I moved there, but I stayed because the trial hadn't happened yet. I stayed, of course, engaged with the United States Attorney's Office. And when the trial came, I actually sat at the witness table with the attorneys and sat through the trial, which normally is reserved for the case agent. And by this time, again, like I said, I've been retired, a new case agent, and she was doing a great job. It wasn't anything against her, but I'd lived this thing for 4 years by that time. And so I thought it was kind of them to let me sit there and be through the process. And I actually testified in for like a couple of hours.
Now, you obviously have many stories, and you can write stories, through your career, but you zeroed in on this for a book. What was your impetus to do that?
Well, so a long story, and you may want to cut a lot of this out. But so, I mean, I remember the day of the trial, walking out with Misty, and I knew then, so we need to write this story down, just because it was so much. And you and I haven't talked about it today, but really, this doesn't belittle Susan any. But you mentioned the Matlock murders. When I went back, and the guys, after I got started, some of the locals there said, "You need to go watch. There's a documentary out there that someone put on. So you need to watch this." And that really almost motivated me more, or at least as much as looking for Susan, because what it showed us, there's this history, or at least a perceived history of the drug culture, of murders being committed in Malvern, people getting away with it. It's not fair. I mean, the prosecutors, good folks, and they do good work, but when you don't have witnesses, some things are hard to do. So anyway, when I saw all that and this culture of silence that we had to break through to, and when I say we, I don't mean the FBI, I mean all the law enforcement that worked the case, that we broke through. And I just thought it was a good story to tell. Well, on this line, I mentioned, earlier when I talked, we don't have the FBI doesn't have a lot of jurisdiction to work homicides. But when I joined in the late 90s, Arkansas, rural state, very few law enforcement agencies had crime scene training. And we had a crime scene unit that our bosses would let us go out and work local crime scenes to help the locals. So there may not be any federal jurisdiction at all, but other than to provide assistance in those crime scenes. Well, I ended up working probably 25 or so death investigations during my career. And most agents probably never work a single murder case. And so I thought, my sons might like to hear some of these stories. And so I started writing some short stories, and I've got about 20 of these that have written up. Tried to find an agent, didn't have any luck. Basically was told there's really not a market for short stories. I have a friend that was a writer, said, "Man, pick one story and write a book on that. And then try your short stories." And that's kind of what led us to the Murder at Midnight. And I've got my next one, I hope is going to be out hopefully by late spring. And it'll be some missing child cases that the FBI helped on in Arkansas. And I've got a couple more after that I might write.
Well, we're going to wrap up here. Gary, if there's anything you want to just throw out there, we're going to again mention where, I forget, do you have a website, or was it Facebook I found you?
I've got a Facebook page, Jerry Spurgers, true crime author. I'll eventually do a website. I just haven't done it yet. I do want to kind of clarify one thing. So I self-published this through Amazon KDP. So Amazon's the only place it's available. It's not in the bookstores. And I'm learning the process, There may be some things a little bit, and I'm not speaking ill of Amazon, but I would like to be able to get into some different, I sell my author copies, and then, when I do presentations, and of course, like I said, it's available on ebook and paperback on Amazon KDP.
There you go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fascinating look at a fascinating case, but as I said in the beginning, you got to get the book, because the book has details, and you'll turn pages, and a little bit you'll smile, a little bit you'll cringe. But the book is Midnight Murder, and it's by Jerry Spurgers. And I want to thank Jerry for joining us today on Murder Most Foul.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim.